Hey friends, welcome back to the Lifestyle School podcast. Today we are talking about one of the most confusing topics in nutrition, and that is sugar. So most people think of sugar as just, sugar, right? But the truth is your body digests doesn't digest all sugars the same way, and the type of sugar you eat can have a very different effect on your blood sugar, your cravings, and your long-term health. So by the end of this episode, my goal is that you'll understand the major types of sugar, how your body processes each one, and most importantly, how that shows up in your day to day energy and metabolism. So, now, as always, before we get into it, a quick disclaimer. I am not a medical doctor, and this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult with your doctor before making any major changes to your diet or lifestyle. Okay, so with that, let's get into it. What is sugar really, right? Sugar is a type of carbohydrate, and carbohydrates are basically chains of sugar molecules. Some are short and sweet, quite literally, and some are long and complex. The simplest are monosaccharides. That's a mouthful. And that includes glucose, fructose, and galactose. And when you think of two of these together, you get what's called disaccharides, and that includes sucrose, lactose, and maltose. So these simple sugars are the building blocks of starches and more complex carbohydrates. And just as a reminder, we have three main groups of food. We have carbohydrates, we have fats, and we have proteins. And so really all carbohydrates are sugar in some form, just different chains, right? So let's break it down one by one. Hopefully you guys find this interesting and it's not too dense, but hang with me. Okay, let's start with glucose. So glucose is your body's preferred fuel. You've probably heard me say that. If you have glucose hanging out in your bloodstream, your body's always going to use that for energy before it accesses any body fat to be used as fuel. It is absorbed directly into your bloodstream after you eat it, and it raises blood sugar quickly, and it triggers an insulin response. Think of glucose as your body's easy fuel. But in excess, what it does is it drives insulin resistance, right? Because your pancreas has to push out more and more insulin to help get that glucose out of your bloodstream and into your cells, your muscles, your liver, or fat cells. And then we have fructose. So fructose doesn't raise blood sugar directly because it doesn't go straight into the bloodstream. It is processed mostly in the liver, where small amounts are fine. However, big asterisk here, large amounts can overwhelm the liver, leading to fat buildup or fatty liver disease, and eventually can cause insulin resistance. And so there is a huge issue with, this was 50 years ago, really never a problem of when people would have liver disease, it was usually always alcohol related. But now non-alcoholic fatty liver disease has become a huge problem. And I do believe it's because of the insane amounts of fructose that we get here in our American diet. I wish I had the number in front of me. I should have actually looked up the actual amounts of sugar that we eat as Americans on average. It's an insane amount, the amount of sugar and flour, but I didn't look them up, guys. So I apologize for that. We can talk about it in another episode. But if you're curious, you should look it up because it's insane. But fructose can damage the liver, cause fatty liver disease, and that can lead to insulin resistance. So just because something is fructose doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be better for you. Next, we have galactose found in dairy paired with glucose to form lactose. So it raises blood sugar more slowly and requires conversion in the liver. And then we have sucrose. This is our table sugar. So it's probably what you have in your pantry right now. It's half glucose and half fructose. And that means you get both a quick blood sugar spike plus the liver load all in one hit. So it's kind of a double whammy. And then we have lactose found in milk. You probably knew that, hopefully. This is glucose plus galactose. And if you lack the enzyme lactase, it can cause bloating, gas, and digestive distress. And that's why there's those, individuals who are lactose intolerant. They can't digest it. They don't have that enzyme lactase. And they don't do well with dairy products. And I want to say this because I think it's something that comes up all the time in my nutrition coaching. And then I just hear people say it all the time. But if you are lactose intolerant, you should not be eating dairy. Because you're causing all sorts of problems for your digestive system because you literally can't digest it. So you're like actively damaging yourself. It's like someone with Crohn's on some level, or not Crohn's, with celiac on some level, eating gluten, despite the consequences. And so I think if you are lactose intolerant, you should take that really seriously, because like don't your digestive system already has enough going on with like the environment and the world we live in, and all the toxic pollutants. We don't need to add that added stress. So that's my little soapbox. I'm exiting now, moving on to maltose. This one often gets overlooked, but it's really important. So maltose is two glucose molecules bound together. Your body breaks it down quickly into glucose, so it has a very rapid effect on our blood sugar. And you might be thinking, well, where do you find maltose? Maybe you haven't heard of it before. It's present in malted products like malted milkshakes, malted cereals, and malt vinegar. You'll also find it in foods made with malted barley, like beer and some breads. And it can show up on labels as malt syrup, malt extract, or malt sugar. So anytime you see the word malt on a label, you can know that that is some variation of maltose, which is a sugar. It also occurs naturally when starchy foods are broken down during cooking or processing. For example, when bread is toasted or potatoes are roasted, some of the starches actually break down into maltose, which gives that sweet browned flavor that we all enjoy and love, right? So now let's zoom out for a little bit and talk about broader categories of sugar. Not all sugars are created equal, while all have an effect on our blood sugar, and understanding where they come from and how they act in the body, I think is really critical. And a case by case basis, you may be able to tolerate some of these more than others. But let's get into it. Okay. So, naturally occurring sugars, these are sugars found in whole foods like fruit, vegetables, and dairy. The key here is context, right? A piece of fruit doesn't just give you fructose, right? It comes with fiber and water and vitamins and phytonutrients. And what that fiber does is it slows down the absorption, meaning you don't get a massive blood sugar spike typically. Dairy sugars like lactose come with protein and fat, which also blunt blood sugar response. And the body was designed to handle sugars in their natural packages. So, having a piece of fruit with natural fructose in it is very different than having a Coke where the, second ingredient is high fructose corn syrup. It's going to be very different, right? The delivery and the amount. Next, we have refined sugars. So these sugars have been extracted, purified, and keyword here, concentrated from plants like sugarcane, sugar beets, or corn. And for example, table sugar, which again is sucrose, which we talked about, or powdered sugar, brown sugar, high fructose corn syrup. When you refine sugar, you strip away all the fiber, all the nutrients, and the natural balance of the sugar, essentially. And what's left is a concentrated hit of glucose and or fructose, and these go straight into your bloodstream and your liver, causing really fast energy swings, really big insulin spikes, and long-term metabolic stress. And so while I would say, and you probably think like refined sugars are worse than natural sugars, they're both, I want to be clear, going to have an effect on your blood sugar. Both can really raise blood sugar, but depending on your body's capacity to handle sugar and carbohydrates in general, the response is probably going to be better with naturally occurring sugars versus refined sugars. Next, we have sugar alcohols. These are neither sugar nor alcohol in the way that you think of it, but their chemical structure looks like a mix of both. So some examples of a sugar alcohol are things like xylitol, erythritol, sorbitol, mannitol. These occur naturally in some fruits and vegetables, but are usually manufactured for use in sugar-free products. And while they provide fewer calories than sugar because they're only partially absorbed, while this does mean less impact on blood sugar, the problem can be the absorption portion, where ferments, some of the sugar alcohols, they aren't absorbed, and so they ferment in your gut, which in some people cause a lot of gas and bloating or even diarrhea if they overdo the sugar alcohol. So, some people handle some sugar alcohols okay. Others have huge issues with it, but they're not going to have the same impact on your blood sugar. So you might not get a big blood sugar spike, but they are impacting your gut microbiome because of the fact that they're not absorbed and the fermentation process. And so you got to remember, you have like 3 to 5 pounds of microbes in your small intestine. And we want to make sure that those microbes are a balance of good microbes, right? Things can be really bad, they can be really good. We want to have a healthy balance of microbes. And so we want to be really careful about what kind of things we let ferment in there. Next, we have artificial sweeteners. So these are synthetic compounds like aspartame, sucralose, and saccharin. And they are hundreds of times sweeter than sugar. So only tiny amounts are needed. They don't raise blood sugar directly, but they're very controversial because research shows they may alter your gut bacteria that we were just talking about. They may influence insulin sensitivity, and they might keep people stuck in a cycle of craving sweet flavors. And I keep saying might and maybe is because I do think the evidence is mixed when it comes to studying artificial sweeteners, but they're artificial. So I don't think, I am of the mind, why would we put something artificial in our body if we don't have to, right? So I am of the opinion, if you're going to want something really sweet, just have like the real thing, have a naturally occurring sugar if possible, and avoid the maybe. Like maybe artificial sweeteners cause cancer. Maybe they make you hungrier or crave sweet things more and eat more junk food. Maybe they don't, but why mess with the maybe, right? So that's artificial sweeteners. And then we have more natural, low calorie sweeteners, things like stevia and monk fruit fall into this category. And they come from plants and have little to no calories, and for the most part, don't raise blood sugar. And I will say they're generally considered safer than like artificial sweeteners, but the jury is still out on whether using them regularly helps break a sugar habit or just perpetuates the desire for sweetness. For some people, I think they can be a great stepping stone, but I think for others, they can really keep the craving alive. And stevia and monk fruit can, while they're like naturally a plant, they can be, how do I put this? Ultra processed, right? And if you've been around for a while, I'm not a super fan of ultra processed foods. And so again, I think it's, I think you got to be careful is what I will say. And I'll leave it at that. Um, so continuing on, let's dive deep into how different sugars affect our blood sugar. And two concepts to know here are glycemic index, abbreviated as GI, and glycemic load, which is typically abbreviated, as GL. So glycemic index measures how quickly a food raises blood sugar compared to pure glucose. It's all about the speed, right? Glycemic load takes into account both the speed and the amount of sugar in a typical serving. And to be honest, this is often more useful in like real life scenarios. And here's how different sugars and sweeteners kind of stack up. So glucose has a glycemic load of 100, the reference point. Consuming glucose spikes your blood sugar almost immediately, which is why glucose tablets are used for diabetics when blood sugar drops too low. Fructose, on the other hand, has a very low glycemic load because it doesn't directly raise blood sugar. But don't be fooled by this. Fructose has a hidden danger. We kind of talked about this earlier. The liver is the only organ that can metabolize large amounts of it. In small amounts, no problem. In excess, though, think things like soda, fruit juice, processed foods, which are typically loaded with fructose. It overwhelms the liver and gets converted to fat and contributes to insulin resistance and metabolic disease. Okay. Sucrose or table sugar is half glucose again, half fructose. That means your blood sugar rises quickly from the glucose while the fructose heads to the liver. Again, it's a double hit. Lactose, found in milk, has a glycemic load that's moderate, but its effect depends on whether your body can digest it or not. People with lactose intolerance experience gut symptoms more than blood sugar spikes, but it's still affecting you in a very negative way. Maltose has a high glycemic load, glycemic index, because it's just 2 glucose molecules. It raises your blood sugar almost as fast as pure glucose. And that's why maltose containing foods like malted cereals or malted milk drinks can cause big blood sugar swings. And then sugar alcohols, as you've probably guessed, most have a very low glycemic index. Erythritol, for example, has a glycemic index of almost 0, and that's why they're common in, quote, keto-friendly foods. But remember, they can upset your gut if consumed in large amounts. And that's why it's really important, talking about like the keto diet. I think when we are trying to follow a specific type of eating plan, whether that's low carb or what, stick to real whole foods as much as possible. You're always like, you can't go wrong, right? So often I see people trying to do like a keto diet and they're buying keto chips or keto desserts or keto snack bars. And it's like, what? Like that defeats the point. Or even like paleo, right? Let's just eat real whole food and everything is going to be so much better. Anything that has sugar alcohol in it is likely going to be ultra processed. And they very well are going to be having an effect on our microbiome. Artificial sweeteners technically have a glycemic load of, I keep saying load, index of 0 since they don't raise your blood sugar. But some studies suggest that for certain people, artificial sweeteners may trigger insulin release. So your brain's thinking, oh, sugar is coming, we need to prepare, and your pancreas releases insulin. And/or it also alters your gut hormones, creating kind of like a phantom response that still affects your metabolism, which I think is really interesting. And then stevia and monk fruit have, again, glycemic index of 0. They don't raise blood sugar and are generally well tolerated comparatively to like sugar alcohols or artificial sweeteners. But as mentioned before, the main concern is whether they keep you hooked on sweetness instead of retraining your, wow, I'm struggling, retraining your taste buds to, be content with just real whole foods that aren't overly sweet. So here is the big picture. Foods with a high glycemic index and glycemic load, like soda, candy, pastries, cause your blood sugar to spike and then crash. And that's the roller coaster of cravings, fatigue, and irritability. Foods with naturally occurring sugars like fruit come with both fiber and water that lower your glycemic load, giving you a gentler rise and fall. And really, that's what we want. Like for people who aren't metabolically unwell, people who aren't insulin resistant, you're going to have a much bigger bandwidth of, what your body can tolerate. You can probably do more fruit, more naturally occurring carbohydrates like grains and starches, and you're going to have like that nice rolling hills effects of your blood sugar. But I will say, and I think this is really important, if you are insulin resistant, if you have a history of like high blood sugar, you've been pre-diabetic, if you're type 2 diabetic, even natural occurring sugars could be a problem for you. Unfortunately, they are for me. I'm constantly trying to keep insulin resistance at bay. I have a family history of type 2 diabetes, and I just know genetically I'm more prone to that based on, I think different things that have happened in my life and things that have been in my lifestyle over the years have contributed to that. And I just don't have the tolerance even for natural sugar. I'm currently wearing a continuous glucose monitor, also known as a CGM. And what I've noticed is I can eat a half of a peach at the end of my meal and my blood sugar doesn't spike like over 30 points. But if I eat a whole peach, my blood sugar always spikes, whether or not it's at the end of my meal. And so we just have to be mindful of our context, our big picture, when it comes to thinking about sugar, when it comes to thinking about what types of sugars or sweeteners that we're using, because we do not want to be on the roller coaster, right? Hidden sugars in processed food, they add up so quickly. And what that is going to do is it's going to keep your insulin elevated all day long. And over time, this constant demand on insulin is what drives insulin resistance and weight gain. So, if you're starting out and you're like, hope I'm not ready to totally get rid of sugar, try to get rid of the ultra processed sugar or the fake sugars in your diet. Just focus on, if you want something sweet, have nature's candy, enjoy the different types of fruits or, honey or maple syrup in what you're eating and then work your way from there, right? Like it's all a process. But like this is a very high level view of sugars that we got into today. And there's so much more to this topic of sugar. And I know, there's a lot of influencers out there like, you should never eat sugar again. Or the people it's like moderation, 80-20. And I will say kind of where I land on it is, I think you got to take it on a case by case basis. I think you got to take it like, where are you at in your journey? That's going to play a big factor into it. What is your health history? Do you have a history of insulin resistance, metabolic disease, high blood sugar? That's going to play into how your body reacts to sugar. And so my goal with this podcast today is I want you to start to like understanding the different forms that we have. Yes, I think it was a little technical, so hopefully I didn't put you to sleep listening to this. But to wrap it up, sugar isn't just sugar. The type of sugar you eat does matter, and your body reacts differently depending on the form it comes in, right? And so your challenge for this week is just swap out one refined sugar for something more natural, whole food source. Maybe it's replacing a soda with a sparkling water with lemon or Spindrift that has, a little bit of sugar in it, or using fruit instead of candy. Start small, right? Notice how your body feels, how your energy changes. Is your energy still crashing, and how your cravings shift? And remember, this is exactly the kind of work we do inside of Lifestyle School for Weight Loss, which is my 8-week course. We don't demonize food. We The goal is to understand it, and we use it strategically. And what we do is we build a lifestyle that supports our body long term based on our specific needs and goals. So with that, guys, again, I know this is kind of a technical podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts or like what questions you have. Because honestly, I do this podcast for myself, but I also do it very much for you. And so if there's a topic, that you are interested in learning more about or questions that you have, send them to me on Instagram. Let me know what you'd like to hear about. Let me know in the comments. And if you found this helpful, I would love it if you'd share it with a friend who's maybe been confused about sugar, or who just wants to learn more. I'd love for you to review the podcast, leave me a review, subscribe. And as always, guys, I'm with you in the struggle. So just keep going one day at a time, one small change. And with that, we will see you on the next episode of the Lifestyle School podcast.